Hello, this is Anna, and today I'd like to talk to you about the books I have read in the month of December. Overall, I have read 16 books plus the Slightly Fox quarterly issue, and I thought I'll divide it into separate sections, otherwise the videos would just be too long. I would rather do several really short ones. So in today's video, I will talk to you about the first 5 books I have read, and I only have 2 physical copies of them. I'm going to talk you through them. There was one Russian book which I listened to as an audio, and there were other 2 books I have read in electronic version. And the first book I have finished in December was this looking slightly innocent but yet the book which nearly defeated me, The Brief History of 7 Killings by Marlon James. This is the Man Booker Prize for 2015. The book written in a very heavy Jamaican language, Jamaican accent. The book which spans several generations in 2 different countries, and a book which I found incredibly difficult to get into. I first purchased it in a hardbound copy and I really struggled with it, so I gave the book away, I DNF'd it, and then decided, well, probably worth a second chance, so I purchased the paper version in a second-hand shop and a charity shop. But even that proved to be very difficult, so I ended up purchasing the audiobook version of this book. I will really recommend the audiobook for those of you who struggle with the language. I personally really did. This book was a labor of love and hate for me. It has taken me 9 months. I've started this in March. I went through it really slowly over the course of 9 months. It led to a lot of research on my behalf. I had to really engage with Wikipedia. I had to read about the political system in Jamaica in the 1970s and 80s. I had to read more about the drug cartels in both Florida and Miami, and mostly in New York City, because this is where the book takes you. I found the language used in this book difficult for a multitude of reasons. Number one, it's the sheer volume of swear words. This book really glorifies swearing in a way. It's like a vocabulary for Jamaican slang swear, which was completely new to me. I had no idea what the heck that meant for about 100 pages. So that made it really difficult. I persevered. I found the slang urban dictionary online and I just used it to guide me through it. Funnily enough, I don't know if it's good or bad, but because I know a bit more of a swear word now, I could detect some of my students swearing and they really didn't expect me. I had the boys using the swear words, which I'm not going to use, but it's very common in Jamaica, begins with a B. And I obviously caught them doing it in the lesson, and I had to do the whole disciplinarian thing, and they were really surprised. Like, well, miss, we've been using this for like a week and none of the teachers picked up, even English teachers, and like, you're Russian, how do you know? I was like, well, I read, guys. This is to reading. The second thing which was really painful for me is the language itself, because it so heavily uses Jamaican slang, and for me, maybe if I was from the United States I would have found it easier, but for me living in United Kingdom, even though we obviously have a lot of Jamaicans, they don't use such strong Jamaican accent when they live in London, they live in United Kingdom. And it was really weird because the British educational system is also described in this book, an aspiration of the parents in the poorer neighborhoods to have this possibility for their children to have a better life. So we first meet the set of characters on a hot summer day in 1976 in the slums of Jamaica. An introduction, I have to say, is pretty brutal. The language itself, the way it follows, is difficult because you have various narrations and it just changes all the time. So every chapter, every part is divided into a chapter. Each part has a title after a specific tract by Bob Marley, because obviously it has his assassination, his attempted assassination has a massive part to do in this book. There are 3 characters you really get to follow throughout the entire book. The rest of them just pop in for various reasons. Some of them pop in and get brutally murdered straight away. Some of them pop in and they get brutally raped straight away. It's very misogynistic in the way it's written. There is very little respect to any females shown in this book, and yet one of the main females, one of the narrators, because the narration is done by multiple voices, is the female in this book. I'm not going to tell you more about this because it will spoil the plot, but we have 3 distinctive voices in this book: 1 female, 1 male, and 1 American male. It's set in Jamaica, and it's also set in the United States, in both Miami, Florida, and in New York City, through the late 1970s all the way to 1990s. It followed the life of the drug cartel and their involvement in assassination of Bob Marley. As I mentioned, it has multiple narrators, one of them being a ghost. This multitude of languages is really disconcerting because you read the book and you just about understand what's going on, and suddenly the narration changes and it's from a point of view of a different character, and you go like, whoa, what is going on? If it is an American narrator, it makes the life heck of easier because the language straight away becomes more Americanized, so you can at least understand what he's saying. But if it's done from Jamaican perspective, there are so many characters in this book. I found listening to the audio while looking at the page a lot easier, particularly in terms of switching the narration, because it was done in multiple languages. I can highly recommend the audiobook. I'm really glad I've read this book. I'm really glad I have persevered. I have given it 4 stars, not 5, because of the sheer violence. There is a scene in there where the person is buried alive, in all of its gruesome detail. There is a scene in this book very early on where the boy has to witness his mother being brutally raped. So this is for 18 plus. This is not for faint-hearted. But reading this has broadened my horizons personally. It introduced me to difficult topics I was not accustomed to. I've known very, very little about the slums in Jamaica, about anything really, about the political system. So I'm glad I did. But saying that, I hardly doubt I will read anything else by Marlon James. I just don't think that is for me. I can understand why this book won the Man Booker Prize. Despite all of the difficulties you will encounter reading this, this is a work of fiction which will enhance English language, because it is written in English language and Jamaican accent is part of the English language, and we should really recognize it. And this book really made me think. The fact that it was a labor of love and it has taken me 9 months, like the same time it takes you to carry a child, tells you something, because I still finished this book. I don't think this book can be easily translated. At least I cannot see how you can translate this book. I have lived in this country for over 16 years now, so I consider myself British. Same as Russian. This year will be half of my life, more than half of my life in this country. So I can relate more to the Jamaican culture through the British colonialism. And I have also lived in the States for a year before that. So again, I can relate a bit more. Like I can relate to all of the stuff mentioned in the United States more. If you've never experienced this, so if you're Russian, for example, I have no idea how on earth you will translate this book, because the language, the sheer language, is just an unsurmountable. I don't know. I would never even try to translate this book. I found that reading it in English a challenge. Reading this in any other language, I think it will lose out quite a lot of its substance. But I know it has been translated into Russian. So that's book number 1. The second book I have read, it's not chronological order I read them, but I thought I'll group them together because they both have very similar, like a lot of similarities. The next book I have read in the month of December was The Fisherman by Chigozie Obioma. This is a Nigerian writer. This is his debut novel, which was shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize in 2015 and ultimately lost out to The Brief History of 7 Killings, and I can see why it have lost, although I find this book way easier to read. This one I managed to do in one sitting. I have talked about this book in my top 10 books of 2016. I have obviously purchased now the paper copy because I've read it electronically, and I really enjoy this book. So the book follows the life of a Nigerian family living in the south. They're quite, I wouldn't say poor, but I wouldn't say the middle class either. The children definitely go to an aspiration middle class British system school. The father works in a bank and he has to leave the town leave the family so he can travel for the business trip and work in a bigger city. So he leaves his 4 older sons in charge with his wife and the younger children. So they have 4 boys, 4 older brothers, and the story is really about them. They are the fishermen. And then there are younger siblings as well. And everything goes just horribly wrong in this book. And out of those 4 older brothers, 2 die. I'm not going to mention how. It will spoil the book otherwise. And 2 of them go through this whole experience changed men. They have to grow up pretty quickly. The narration is done from the point of view of the younger brother. The narration is super vivid, and I have sung praises to this book in my top 10 books of 2016 videos, so I'm gonna leave a link down below for you to watch. I highly recommend this book. Again, it does have violence. The language is pretty raw, but if you're thinking about reading either of those 2, this one will appeal to a wider audience, and I think this one will be an easier book to read as well. I have also read Ian McEwan Nutshell in December, and it was a big disappointment for me. I think that book has divided the internet really. Some people think it's his best novel. For me personally, it was a disappointment. I did not like the book. We follow basically fanfiction narration of Hamlet, but Hamlet himself is the fetus growing inside his mother, and towards the end of the book she gives birth to him. So he can hear everything what's going on around him while he is in her tummy. And obviously she plots to kill her husband. If you read Hamlet, if you know anything about Hamlet, you'll know the plot, so I'm not spoiling it for you. She's cheating her husband with his brother, so the uncle of Hamlet, in the marital house, because her husband, who is a poet, basically been kicked out by her while she's pregnant. The uncle is a really unpleasant character. The mother I did not feel for at all. To me, she was just a drunken. I just could not get through the fact that she was constantly drinking alcohol while being heavily pregnant. But what really distraught me and spoiled the book is the language used by the fetus, because however modern you want to make your work, however revolutionary you want to present it, I just could not buy the fact that the fetus could have such a level of sophistication and such an understanding around the world. If he had a level of experience the mother had, I could have possibly bought it, but the mother presented herself as a very stupid woman. She was drawn as a pretty stupid character. So if the mother is pretty stupid, how can a fetus be, without experiencing anything outside, be that smart? I don't know. I really did not like the book. It's only 200 pages. And I've read it twice, and I've listened to an audio version on Radio 4, and I still really disliked it. The 4th book on the list would be Alice Smith and Her Public Library and Other Stories. This was my very first Alice Smith book, and I gave it 3 stars out of 5. I did enjoy it. It's a collection of short stories on the subject of public libraries, and it also tells you some of the accidents from her life which involved public library access. Really, I think what moved her to write this is the big change in the United Kingdom, where we have, even before the whole Brexit thing, we had this desire by current government to curtail all the funding we have to the local councils in order to save money. Like, I can understand the need for that. And the one way they decided to do it is by shutting down public libraries, because people just don't use them anymore. And in Cambridge City Centre, I mean, we still have a public library. It's just been renovated. But Cambridge is a very unique city. All around the United Kingdom, a lot of the libraries have been closed during the last 3-4 years. And if they weren't, there was a lot of public campaign to preserve them. For example, I work in a school which is not in Cambridgeshire, which is down south from Cambridge. I commute every day, and all of us teachers and our students, we have collected signatures to save the library in the town I work in. It has been saved, but it has been changed in a way that the place it used to occupy was deemed too expensive to keep, so they limited the number of books available and they rented a smaller place for it. So it has undergone a transformation in a way, but at least the idea of having the place where you can take your children if you can't afford to buy books is still there. You might have to order and wait for a couple of weeks for them to be delivered from a larger regional center, but it's not a problem. I mean, I'm one of those people who is very fortunate. I always had access to public library. And one of my earliest memories is going to the public library over the summer holidays with my mom and then later by myself. So I do take it a bit for granted as how difficult it is for some people who live particularly really far away from the modern access to modern, I wouldn't say civilization, but the commodities such as that you can have internet. I have fiber optic internet, so potentially if I want to read a classic, I can just download it for free. And you have places where you don't have internet such readily available. So if you're talking about Scotland, for example, in the Highlands, they still have those mobile libraries, shall we say. The mobile, like it's a car or double-decker bus converted into library. It will come once a week. I have seen them in Norway when I was traveling this year, and I think it's a wonderful part which binds the community together. So I applaud Alice Smith's decision to write the book. But it's been 3 weeks now, and I can't really remember that much about the stories I have read. They were interesting, they were engaging. I really liked the language. I remember them being really personal to her, but as far as there's something standing out, really sticking to my mind, it's not really the case. Therefore, 3 stars. Finally, the book I have read in December was the audiobook, and it's a Russian book which has not been translated into English. That is by Daria Dezombre. Not Daphne Di Maria, Daria Dezombre. I think we can see where the inspiration came from in that name. It's called Тени старой квартиры, or Shadows of the Old Flat, and it's a detective story. I think it's the 5th in the series, and I've listened to the entire series in the 2016. And it follows the girl from Moscow who is this young, super talented detective, and she goes to see her grandmother who lives in St. Petersburg, and her grandmother's old friend dies under really strange circumstances, and they ask her to investigate what really happened. And it turns out it has something to do with this flat. As you know, in Soviet Union there was a massive shortage of apartments. The people who came particularly from the countryside, they didn't have any accommodations. So what happened is the rich people who had large apartments had them confiscated away from them, and they were subdivided. So you would have, say, a 9-bedroom flat divided to a point where you can have several families living in a larger room, or you will have one family having a room of their own, sort of communal flats. They were a massive part of Soviet Union, particularly in St. Petersburg and in Moscow. And in St. Petersburg, I mean, I still witnessed them, because when I went to school, I had friends who were living in those apartments. So my best friend at school, she occupied 3 rooms out of 7, but they had a communal kitchen. So they had multiple ovens and multiple fridges they had to share. They had 1 toilet for several families, so there was a rota who had to clean what, and 1 bathroom. So you can see how that presented itself with a multitude of issues to deal with every single day. But they were part of life. So what I liked about the book I've listened to is that the main story takes you back to the siege of St. Petersburg, obviously in the 1940s, and then it follows the story of multiple families who had to live together due to circumstances in that flat in 1956. And there was a woman who used to own that whole flat who was poisoned in 1956, and people thought that that must be the grandmother, the friend of the grandmother, but it wasn't. So we'll follow that story and find out what really happened. The story itself is not realistic enough. I didn't really like the detective story, but as an audiobook it was pretty nice, because they played the music and clips from TV series and everything from 1956, so you really felt the atmosphere of the time. I don't know if it's ever going to be translated into English. It's not even that popular in Russia, but I stumbled into, just by chance, on a Russian version of Goodreads, and I felt, well, why not? I'll give it a chance. I will still continue to listen to all of the new books published by that author. They're nice and easy thing to do, but they're not really a work of literary fiction. So that concludes the first part of my reading for December, and I think I'll do 2 more parts because I've done 5 books and I have 11 to go. Yeah, hope you enjoyed it. See you soon, guys. Bye.